morning, ladies and gentlemen. Salamat Sejahtera. It's great to be here today. I'm a bit intimidated actually because I know a lot of you have a lot of expertise in this sector and I'm here to talk fairly generally, so I look forward to also learning from you. But today I will be here to talk about the digital economy and the enormous opportunities for Southeast Asia and Australia together. As you all know, as you're experts in this field, it's a global market, and this is why Australia is working globally and with ASEAN countries, including Malaysia, to ensure the rules for trade and investment in the digital economy sector support innovation and growth. Southeast Asia's digital economy is expected to be worth up to US $1 trillion in 2030. And in Australia, the benefits of digitalisation should reach up to US $27 billion per year by 2030. Digital standards, e-commerce and cybersecurity will be key to deepening digital interconnectivity and trade, ensuring inclusive growth. That is why summits such as this one, which bring together industry leaders and government, are so important for supporting the continued growth of this critical sector of which you're all part. A little bit more about Australia and data centres as enablers of digital economy. Like Malaysia, demand for data centres in Australia has grown with the adoption of cloud computing, which is surging with the need for greater computing power to support the growing use of AI in our lives. Over the last 10 years, data centre and cloud growth in Australia has accelerated significantly, with both Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure and Global Cloud locally hosted in Australia. Geographically, Australia is a massive country, as many of you know, spanning 3 different time zones. So there are multiple data centre hotspots with plenty of co-location options available, providing businesses the opportunity to set up their own cloud infrastructure or components in existing data centre. Australia plays host to over 300 data centres and nearly 750 service providers. Australia is one of the densest data centres per capita in the world, which reflects where we see our future in the high-tech economy, and I can see Malaysia's wanting to have the same kind of impact in this sector. Australia's international connectivity is serviced by 3 main submarine cables, 2 on our east coast, Sydney, Melbourne, and 1 on our west coast, around Perth. Australia is well connected to Southeast Asia, primarily via locations such as Hong Kong, Singapore, and most recently Malaysia. Some of our major Australian data centre operators have already invested or are planning on investing in Malaysia. This includes AirTrunk, which will shortly open the first phase of its 11 billion ringgit data centre investment into Johor Bahru. And NextDC is building a 3 billion data centre here in Selangor near Kuala Lumpur. Together, these investments will support high-paying and high-skilled employment for many hundreds of workers in Malaysia through the design, building and operating phases. But the main benefit is the spillover effects and jobs that such digital investments produce by attracting industry-leading digital clients to Malaysia. As the use of AI and digital technology becomes more mainstream, more powerful service for AI and deep learning will be needed. That's been Australia's experience. This next generation of data centres will consume far more power and create more heat than earlier centres. And managing this while trying to manage our climate goals and our energy needs will be a major challenge. We know, for example, that generative AI, such as GPT, requires 5 times the processing power and storage of traditional data centres. I was asked last week at the National Economic Forum, which was held here in Kuala Lumpur, what is it that the Australian government requires? Because I know that's a really active debate in the DC investment space here in Malaysia. We have concerns about water and energy, just like Malaysia does. So what the Australian government has decided to do is we now require data centres to be energy efficient and have introduced a rating system called NABERS, National Australian Built Environmental Rating System. All government contracts require a minimum of 5 stars out of 6 stars in order to be eligible for contracts. And many ASX companies, pretty much all of them now, require high standards for the clients of data centres. Data centres are now marketing themselves as green data centres that use renewable energy, biofuels, liquid cooling systems, and groundwater cooling that can minimise the environmental impacts of resource-intensive processing and storage. This ensures that they meet the rising demand from organisations that want to store their data in energy-efficient facilities so they themselves can meet their net zero commitments. I'm pleased to report that Australian data centres are leading the way in environmental sustainability, both in Australia and they're introducing this technology in Malaysia. In Australia, Green Square DC is building a 1 billion 96 megawatt hyperscale facility purpose-built for resource-intensive AI computing. What's more, it will be powered by clean energy, use considerably less water and be built using sustainable materials with far less embodied carbon. Here in Malaysia, Australian data centre operator AirTrunk, whom I mentioned earlier, has signed the first ever data centre renewable energy virtual power purchase agreement under Malaysia's corporate green power program. I look forward to further announcements from Australian data centres operators who are choosing to set up in Malaysia over the coming years. How does this fit with our relationship with Malaysia? For your information, I know many of you might be across this, Malaysia is Australia's 8th largest trading partner and our 2nd largest partner in ASEAN. On investment, Malaysia is the 13th largest investor into Australia and Australia is the 15th largest investor into Malaysia. But together we can do more. As some of you may be aware, last year the Australian government released our Southeast Asia Economic Strategy to 2040, which outlined a plan for significantly increasing our trade and investment with Southeast Asia. Naturally, the strategy identified the digital economy as a priority sector for supporting both Australia and Southeast Asian economic ambitions. The government has already made a number of announcements to support these goals. In March this year, the Australian government announced a 2 billion Australian financing facility to provide loans, guarantees, equity and insurance for projects that increase Australian trade and investment into Southeast Asia, particularly in support of the region's clean energy transition and infrastructure development. Under the strategy, we're also rolling out inbound trade missions to Southeast Asia. We were delighted to host Australia's Assistant Minister for Trade, a few weeks ago, who led an Australian mission to Singapore and Malaysia to explore commercial opportunities for decarbonising our maritime sectors. We've established an investment deal team across Southeast Asia, including here in Malaysia, to work with Australian investors, Southeast Asian businesses and governments to identify and facilitate investment opportunities in Southeast Asia. We think many of them will be in the digital economy and hopefully with some of you here today. But our efforts to support the digital economy don't start and end with the strategy. During the recent Prime Minister Anwar trip to Australia, which was the 2nd annual leaders meeting held in Melbourne this year, Malaysia and Australia formalised a MOU on cybersecurity to support our cooperation in this critical area, including through sharing best practice, developing cyber skills and strengthening our networks. The Australian government is also proud to be working with MDEC, who play a critical role in facilitating Australian investment into Malaysia's digital sector. Through our MOU with MDEC, Australia will be helping to build the Malaysian talent pipeline for the growing data centre sector here. While Australia is making significant data centre investments into Southeast Asia, we really also welcome foreign investment into our own data centre sector, including future investors from Malaysia. Both Western Australia and the Northern Territory have a number of clean energy projects which have potential to supply gigawatts of green power to data centres. Data centre operators and their investors are willing to explore the Australian market will find it relatively easy to secure large-scale green power purchase agreements to power their hyperscale and AI investments. For example, the US data centre giant Equinix recently signed a 115 megawatt green PPA to power its 17 centres across Australia. The Australian government also has various incentives to encourage the construction of green data centres. For example, Australia now offers an R&D tax incentive whereby data centres involved in eligible research and development activities can claim tax offsets or deductions under the Australian R&D tax incentive program. We're happy to share anything with Malaysian policymakers on some of these policies if interested. Also, our Austrade officials are here today if you have further questions. To conclude, Australia and Southeast Asia have so much to gain from cooperating, investing and innovating in the DC and cloud computing sector. Commercial success in the digital economy sector is not a zero-sum game. We can all benefit. We look forward to working with you on our digital economy journey. Terima kasih.